As our studies now then move on to the consequences of the crash and the Depression, and we start looking at what Roosevelt undertook and what he meant by his New Deal, it's worth revisiting the overall banner poster that we've got to give the big picture of this entire course to do with the United States. We know that core American values are illustrated over here on the right-hand side: isolationist, rugged individualism, small government. These core politically cultural values that the Americans have has always led America to have small government, unless of course probably it's wartime, and this small government has very little directly to do with the American people. When Hoover was elected in 1929, he was elected on a ticket, a mandate to do nothing, to follow the standard laissez-faire policies that had worked so well for Harding and continued to work so well for Coolidge. So obviously when the crash happens in 1929, there is no precedent. Hoover doesn't instinctively know what to do. And as we saw from the lesson, what did Hoover do? We see that generally the consensus is that he does too little, too late. In our reading and studying of the course, we know that the Democrats nominate Franklin Delano Roosevelt to be the president, and he talks in terms of his New Deal. Now, obviously, Roosevelt has this wonderful advantage over Hoover in that he is seeking permission from the American people to do something different, to do this New Deal. And in doing this, he knows that initially what America needs to do is relieve the crisis of the Depression. Now, the metaphor that we're going to use for this is that if America has indulged in that throughout the 1920s, in 1929 and through to 1932, America has flatlined. America is in intensive trouble. And what FDR attempts to do is, through the relief element of his first New Deal, what he's actually doing is getting America into intensive care. He's going to resuscitate the patient. He's going to keep the patient alive. Now, in doing this, what he's doing is he's moving America away from the extreme right-wing, laissez-faire, Republican ideology that dominates American society. And he's actually saying is that what we need to do is get the government involved. The government is the only institution with the resources and the means that can actually do this. And in doing that, I'm going to propose that what he actually attempts to do is out-Hoover Hoover. Hoover became more interventionist, but too little too late. FDR is going to upsize that. He's going to upscale the intervention. And initially, he's going to save the economy and consequently links to the social well-being of Americans. His second New Deal, however, is going to reform the system to make sure that America can't go back to the situation that caused the crash in 1929. And I propose that relief is the easier of the two, because there was an obvious need to relieve. But to reform a system that is traditionally here is going to require greater action and proactivity on the part of Roosevelt. I'm also going to propose, when we study this course, is that actually, as far as Roosevelt moves to the center ground of politics by getting the US government involved in the lives of American people, we see in 1937 that at the first opportunity, the first signs that the American economy is recovered, Roosevelt is happy to move the political ground back to the more traditional center-right area of the political spectrum, because he believes the New Deal has fulfilled its intentions. And he withdraws. And in doing so, he triggers the Roosevelt recession, showing that although the economy had been relieved, the belief that the economy had been reformed and saved was actually not true. And subsequently, he realizes that the American political landscape has shifted irrevocably towards the right. We will then move on to study the events of World War II, and again, we will speculate that actually what saved the American economy in the long term was not the relief of the first New Deal, nor the reform of the second New Deal, but ultimately it would be the massive massive organisation and expenditure of the federal government from the commencement of World War II in 1941.